So this is coming down. It may have already been released, but I got a hold of it last night. A letter from the Urban Council to Mayor Quinton Lucas for immediate release March 19th of 2025. That would be today, for those of you wondering, in case you're a little out of it.
Talk about a bombshell.
Yes, that's today. And it reads here, Dear Mayor Lucas and the KCMO City Council, the time for action is now. Fire City Manager Brian Platt. They write here, Kansas City stands at a crossroads. And let me just preface this by saying this is exactly, well, it's not the reason why they shouldn't fire Brian Platt, but it's one of the reasons they should not fire Brian Platt. They write here, Kansas City stands at a crossroads. The question before you is not simply whether City Manager Brian Platt should remain in his position. It is whether you will stand on the side of justice, accountability, and the citizens who elected you, or if you will allow the continued erosion of integrity and public trust in our city's leadership. They write here, Platt is a well-documented pattern of racism, sexism, retaliation against Black, Latino, and female employees. He has orchestrated forced resignations, fostered a toxic and racially hostile workplace, and has cost taxpayers $7 million in civil rights, wrongful termination, and whistleblower payouts. Says here, Mayor Lucas ignored the concerns of Black council members when Platt was hired, and now the city is paying the price. Can someone remind me what color skin Quinton Lucas has? Remind me of that.
You have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and right. You ain't black.
No, that's right. He is a black guy. They write here, moreover, if Platt had been a black man with a smattering of these infractions, his removal would have been swift and merciless. Okay. These groups have been after Brian Platt since day one because he is white. We talked about this yesterday. I know it to be a fact that there were people who back in 2020, remember how dumb the world was back then, who literally were upset that Brian Platt got the job because he was white. That is the very definition of racism. And I know that we're told that racism can only be in one direction, but that's not true. So people did not give Brian Platt a shot out of the gates because he's a white man. And this is now their moment to get rid of him because he's a white guy. They renewed his contract last year. If there were all these things out there about Brian Platt, why did you guys at the city council renew his contract? I don't know if Brian Platt's the best city manager in the history of Kansas City. From the outside looking in, he's doing a halfway decent job. You know, he's not in charge of the schools. He's not in charge of the police. So those two big issues in Kansas City have nothing to do with him. His job is like potholes and street lights and snow removal. And, that's kind of it. Beautify some of the intersections. And he's probably done too much on the bike lanes. But, that's just a personal pet peeve of mine. I'll leave to the side for now. But as far as I can tell, you talk to a lot of people in this town, they think he's done a good job. And I've talked to people in different parts of the city who work in City Hall and those who work with City Hall on the outside, in the private sector, development community. They all like him. They all think he's done a pretty darn good job overall. So ask yourself why now, after this lawsuit gets settled with this former employee, Chris Hernandez, a week and a half ago, Platt gets put on suspended leave one day later, and now the Urban Council is calling for his job. And this is Gwen Grant of the Urban League. This is Reverend Dr. Vernon Howard, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, Bishop James Tyndall, Urban Summit, Nimrod Chapel, NAACP. What a perfect name, Nimrod Chapel. These are the people who now are calling for him to be ousted. And they call him a racist, which is one of the worst things you can call somebody in 2025. Because unless you have, it's one of those things where it's impossible to defend yourself from. You say, I'm not a racist. Like, I'm a decent person. I treat people the same way, black, white. It doesn't matter. You get called and you get labeled a racist. It's one of the worst things you can call somebody in 2025. Here's the problem. The real racists are these people. They're the racists. The ones who are screaming racism the loudest are the ones who are guilty of what they're accusing Brian Platt in this case of being. And if this city council has any backbone left to it, and I think that Quentin Lucas deep down would want to do the right thing, and that is basically tell these organizations to pound sand, and they're not going to get their scalp that they desperately want to Brian Platt. For some reason, I think he's afraid to do it. I don't quite know. Well, he thinks it will hurt him in his political future, but here's the thing. There is no political future right now for Quentin Lucas, at least not in this part of the world. There's no path in Missouri. Cleaver may retire, but Cleaver will not want Quentin Lucas to be his successor. He can, come on and talk about how he's got a good relationship with Cleaver and goof on me for saying things like that. I know it to be true. Cleaver is not going to sit there and let Quentin Lucas take his spot. Now, it doesn't mean Lucas can't, but he's not going to work on his behalf to help him. It's not going to happen. So his political future, if it does exist anywhere, is not going to be driven by these race hustlers in Kansas City. He's a lame duck mayor, and it's time for him to say, you know what? No, I'm going to stand by my guy. He's done a solid job. Okay, yes, this lawsuit got settled. Chris Hernandez got $1 million out of it. I'm also hearing that there was some bad legal advice that may have been given from City Hall and the attorneys on behalf of the city of Kansas City, where they could have saved themselves a lot of money. I'd be looking at my attorneys saying, guys, how did you let this happen? We should have known what was going to come out of this because the payout was much more than some kind of a settlement would have been. And the city is getting sued left and right. That's the problem as well right now. They are dealing with lawsuits all over the place. There are lawsuits coming out of the water department. There are lawsuits coming out of every corner of this city government. And it's because people see them as easy pickings right now. And frankly, the lawsuit culture is out of control. It's worse in Missouri than it is in Kansas right now with the trial attorneys. So they're getting theirs. And there's no one easier to sue than the government. Your cities, councils, you can work your way up through these bureaucracies. They are very easy to sue, and everyone's looking to get their hands on a dollar right now. I mean, lawsuit culture is sadly alive and well. And that's how you end up in this world where they're like, oh, man, Brian Platt's dealing with all these lawsuits, and we got to get rid of them. I don't know. It's not evident to me how things would be different if there was somebody else in that spot. And in the end, if you think he's doing a good job and you just renewed his contract a year ago and there was nothing to suggest he was not doing the job he was hired to do, why would you give these people their scalp? When they're the ones who claim Brian Platt is a racist, when they're the real racists. So I don't know what happens tomorrow. Tomorrow they're supposed to decide whether or not Platt is going to continue to be the city manager. What I believe is going to happen, based on talking to some folks inside of City Hall, is that this will get delayed. They will kick the can down the road on Platt because they got to figure out this $2.5 billion budget. And that's got to be the priority tomorrow when they all meet. So my guess is they will delay this a couple of weeks, and that may be good for Platt to buy some time. But now it's up to this city council to stand up. The problem is, standing up to the urban council, they'll just call you a racist. That's the problem. If you back Brian Platt, who they have called a racist, you are then going to be called a racist. That's the game they're playing. Who's going to have the cojones at City Hall to do it, on the city council to do it? There's not many of them. But I hope they will end up doing the right thing.